All right, so welcome. Welcome, everyone out there in social media land. We are the Flint Public Health Youth Academy, and we're here today with another one of our talk shows, A Youth Perspective. Today's talk show is about self-care. We want to talk about how we are as individuals taking care of ourselves, one, as we're dealing with COVID, but then two, as we're transitioning back into school, work, and other social engagements. So we're excited about today's show. Let's get right to it. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Everett as you start us off with our questions for today.
All right, so like Dr. Key said, today we're talking about self-care. And our first question for that is going to be, how do you define self-care? Now, this doesn't have to be like a super textbook answer. We're looking for like how you feel you define self-care. So whoever wants to go first.
So for me, I would define it as something that you like can take like a mental break from essentially. So that can be something like, walking around in like a park or something and just having that free time and space for you to like clear your mind and clear your thoughts and really just try to collect yourself like mentally and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I would define it just as like you said, taking a break just from life, especially like going back into like school and stuff. Sometimes I just gotta like step back and kind of just think over some things. Cause like in the moment, I'll just be doing a thing after thing after thing after thing and just be going and like never take a break and like actually like see how I'm feeling. Like I'll just be going for days at a time and not like take the time to realize that I'm tired or I'm stressed out or I need a break. So that's definitely true. Does anyone else want to go?
So oh, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead, Cole.
you go.
Go ahead, Cole.
Oh, okay. I see well-being is just like your person. Yeah, basically I see as just your personal well-being as well as your mental health well-being. Or yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I think of self-care, I think of it in so many different like perspectives and different variations. But for me, in all of those variations, it's kind of like just giving yourself time to reboot and to kind of like re-energize. So it can be mental. And especially as we're talking about mental health this summer, oftentimes life has a way of throwing very traumatic, stressful events at us. And yet we, because out of survival, you have to keep grinding to pay the bills. You got to keep grinding to get out of school, no matter how you feel you're trying to graduate. And so a lot of times we have these drivers that are driving us, but sometimes it's driving us to the point to where we don't realize that we're mentally exhausted or psychologically exhausted. But that can also be the same culturally and or physically. You can be physically exhausted and not be mentally exhausted. So I think self-care is just taking time to reboot, whether it's spiritual, mental, psychological, physical, and giving yourself time to basically replenish so that you can continue doing what it is that you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else want to go? Okay. With that being said, we're gonna move on to the second question, which is, what is your self-care routine? So for this one, I'm gonna go first. Um, I don't like have a full self-care routine that I like repeat on a daily basis. It kind of just is what I feel will help me in the situation. So some days that's like turning the TV off, turning like the music off, and just sitting in my room and just thinking. Sometimes it's turning on some music while I'm cleaning up or something, and like just thinking, or like sometimes not thinking is what I need. So I'll like turn on the TV and watch something just to kind of like clear my head. So like I'm not constantly thinking about the next thing, or like maybe I got an assignment due that's stressing me out. So I don't have to think about that. Sometimes I just put things on that'll like clear my head. So I just have time to myself where I don't feel like everything is just demanding of me. Anyone else?
So for me, I like taking like late night drives and just listen to music. Um, that's a really good way to clear my head for me. Um, and then also, I think like working out and like playing basketball, that type of thing. It really like puts you in the moment and really not really have to think about anything outside of like what you're presently doing. So I think that that's really helpful for me personally.
Yeah.
Music is my escape, like music, singing, making music. It helps to put me in a different vibe, a different zone mentally. Also, I'm a person, I love traveling. So traveling is self-care, and I love being near water. And I don't mean like little rivers and ponds. I'm talking about like oceans. So I think that it takes me to a place where I am kind of in my zone creatively. Now, just on a daily basis, just meditation, like just having some moments of silence, centering myself, affirmations, affirming myself, especially when I'm dealing with challenging experiences or challenging tasks, reminding myself that everything that I need is within and that I just need to draw from that energy. And so those are some things that I do for self-care.
Yeah,
For me,
definitely.
sorry, I was just gonna say for me, it's just music, uplifting music, and watching like reality TV shows are pretty funny. So that's what I do for self-care.
Let me jump in real quick, Everett. Monisha just said something. Literally, this whole pandemic, I have watched more comedies than I've ever watched in my life. And I have needed laughter helps. Laughter lifts the burden, it lifts the pressure. And so I've been watching comedies, older comedies, newer comedies, stand-ups, movies. I don't know how many times I've watched like Coming to America, Harlem Nights, like the classics, right? But I have literally just been, and even just sitcoms that are comedy based. Like I haven't been watching any serious movies. I don't want to see serious stuff. COVID is serious enough for me, but just stuff that just makes me laugh. And comedy has really been a help for that.
Yeah, Dr. Q, you just brought up a really big point for me, especially in the pandemic. Just anything too serious, I just have not had like a good like a space where I felt comfortable just watching or consuming that type of content. Like whether it's music, TV, like reading, like anything that is like super serious, I just noticed that I cannot like I don't have the same like eager to consume that type of content. And I think most of that is just like growing up because life is serious. So like when I was younger, I always wanted to be older. So I'd always like read things and watch things that, talked about real life. But now that I'm getting to the age where I'm working like an actual job where like I have to be around people that I don't necessarily like or that I do like, it just I can't consume that same stuff anymore. So if that was all for that question, we can go on to the next one, which is how does school/work affect your self-care habits?
For me, I feel like school, it really like you have to really like make time to like self-care. Like you have to organize and plan it out because if you don't, you might have like a little assignment or a test that creeps up, and you don't want that to be like, oh, I forgot about this certain assignment or test or whatever. So for me, I think it's all about organization which I'm still working on, even though I'm like still like, you know, a little bit further in college. It's like you gotta keep track of time because that's very, very important.
Absolutely, Amir. When I think of work and school, period, I mean, all the years I was in school and then now working at a university. And then when you think about the pressure to perform, to meet a certain bar or level of performance, whether it's academically, whether it's professionally, on your career trajectory. And then there's also the pressures and the stressors of just having to interact with different personalities while you're in the workplace or while you're in school. I mean, sometimes you put in a group assignment and you're with different personalities that may not be the best at collaborating, right? And so you have to pivot so that it doesn't create a stressor for you. So when I think about those stressors, there are times when I've come home and just totally exhausted and didn't even go to the gym or didn't go work out. And so, like Amir said, you have to be very strategic and intentional about carving out time to literally, you know, do whatever your self-care regimen is. And that you are not so overcome by the stressors of work and or school that even when you have time, you're just not even centered enough to even engage in that self-care regimen. Mentally, and as far as mental health, what I do is I literally have people that I'm accountable to. So if you got a workout partner, give them permission to bug you until you get to the gym that day, like literally. So that has been a way that I have been able to be accountable when I didn't make time to do those things. So.
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things for me. Cause just with school and working like during the school year, I don't always I'm not always holding myself accountable to make time. Like I'll get home from school and then I'll have like 30 minutes before I gotta go to work and I'll get off work 4 or 5 hours later and just not have energy to do anything. And I know that's not good. Um, that's like something that I'm working on now is like being more like realistic about my time, as well as like making sure I'm strategic about what I do in my day. So like if I know that I'm gonna go to school and I'm gonna be tired after school and I'm not gonna want to go to work, let me not tell him that I'm gonna work after school. You know, I gotta work on things like that because for some reason it's just like I feel like I'm always not doing enough. But then like in the moment, I'm like, oh, I'm doing way too much. I need to sit down somewhere. So that's like a big thing that I'm working on for me right now. Does anybody else want to go? Okay. If no one else wants to go, I'm gonna pass it over to Amir.
Okay, so hope you guys are staying safe and everyone's healthy and all that. So let's continue on with the questions. So do you think you had a better self-care habits before COVID? Or did you develop better habits during the pandemic? So feel free to answer.
Oh, for me, I think I had better self-care habits before COVID, just because I felt like um during COVID, I like lost a lot of motivation to do things. So like I already didn't, want to do anything, but also during COVID, I picked up more responsibilities. Like I started working more. I started, like giving my time to other things. So I feel like during COVID, I kind of scrambled a little bit to try and get my life together. Well, beforehand, I kind of had a routine and I knew like my day to day was going to be like this every day, every week, every month. It was always going to be the same. And like I was locked into that. But when COVID hit, everything changed up. I had to adjust to not being at school. And then like we might go to school or like we might not go to school or we go to school for one day and then be gone for the rest of the year. So COVID just was a weird time to try and like implement self-care habits just because everything was constantly changing. Like I'm in one place this day, I'm in another place this day. So for me, I probably have more like solid self-care habits before COVID.
Yeah. So just to add on to that point, for me personally, I feel the same way that you do. Before I had like a good sleep routine, all that different type of stuff. And since COVID happened, because I remember it was just like school, right? And then COVID happened, and then boom, you're off 2 weeks, we thought, and then just everything just changed. So like, I think one of the things that I'm trying to work on now is like getting more used to sleeping habits since we're going into like this hybrid learning type of stage. And I think like COVID kind of really took me out of my like self-care routine a lot with different type of things. And especially with school, because it was like 1 minute you're on campus or in high school, and then the next minute you're just it's a whole new different thing. So yeah, I think my self-care habits were better before COVID.
I think for me, COVID made me more aware of self-care. Like I was grinding and working and working and working. And before I knew it, I wasn't taking time, right? Because it was so much work to be done. And I think with COVID and so many people passing away that I knew due to COVID at that time, I became more aware of what's really valuable and what is really meaningful versus that is not, as like we prioritize things, right? And I think self-care was one of those things I reprioritized because life is like a vapor. It's here today and gone tomorrow in a matter of seconds. And I started to look at self-care like you paying yourself, right? You work all this time and you make money, right? And the first person you pay when you get your paycheck, and this is outside of your hands, is the government. They're going to get their piece, right? It's called taxes, right? And then you got to pay mortgage and rent and car notes and student loans and all of those things, right? But there should be a small percentage, if nothing else but 10%, that you pay yourself, right? Whether you put that in your savings or something. And I'm learning using that analogy in self-care to pay myself in self-care, right? Every pay period, I need to make sure that I do something that's self-care related. A couple of friends and myself, we're talking about doing some type of outing every quarter of the year, every 3 months. If it's nothing but for a weekend, to go somewhere, to get away, to disconnect from work and things, and really paying yourself with the currency of self-care. And that's what I'm learning to do. And I think that would be a mental booster for all the stressors that we have to deal with on a regular basis.
Great answers. Anyone else would like to go or share their thoughts? Okay, then on to the next one. So is self-care a common discussion in your inner circles or in your circles?
For me, it's kind of weird because I feel like in a way it is, but in a way it isn't. Like in my inner circle, we don't define it as self-care, but I do find myself often, like even my friends will like, yo, you're doing too much. Like you worked every day this week and you're 16. Like you gotta take a day off. Like you gotta chill. You gotta find something, to relax yourself with. Or like when I see that one of my friends is stressing out, I be like, hey, come like hop on the game with me, or let's go do this. Let's go grab food. Let's go see a movie. Like let's do something to like get your mind off of this. Or like if they're stressing about school, I'm like, is there something that I can help you with? Like, is there something that like I can walk you through, or like we can just talk about, and hopefully, it'll make it easier. I feel like, especially in my generation, a lot of people don't define it as self-care, but they do find ways to, implement self-care without calling it self-care.
I think
Oh,
I agree with that because oftentimes we do things that's fun, but just because it's fun doesn't necessarily mean it's self-care. Like for some people, working out isn't fun, but it's still self-care, right? And so I think that it's not common, as it should be, to use the term or the language self-care in your inner circle. Self-care comes with almost an intention, right? An intention to put yourself in a space where you're able to rejuvenate yourself, and just happening to, go to the park with your friend could be that, but that's not necessarily, if that's not always everyone's intention. Sometimes it's just to get out the house. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I like that aspect of going and having fun with the intention of it bringing about some type of self-care, because to be honest, a lot of us don't use that term because, there's a stigma. We don't really talk about mental health often, and so we're trying to break down that stigma. So to now embrace what's needed to make sure we have good mental health, which is self-care, it's kind of like we don't really say that term either as much. So I think we're trying to normalize the concept of mental health, the whole spectrum, from the bad, the depression, the anxiety, all of those things, all the way to positive mental health. And that's where self-care comes in to keep us in that positive mental health spectrum. So I think that as we start having these conversations more and normalizing the concept of self-care and mental health, I think that it will be more common in our circles, to answer your question in there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Dr. Key. I think when we talk about the definition of self-care, a lot of people, including myself, who like before I was like super like educated on what self-care meant, I feel like I always thought self-care applied to something physical, was washing your face, brushing your teeth, like stuff like that. I didn't realize that self-care was literally anything to give your mind a break, to give yourself a break. Like I feel like that's one of the big things that is like a gap in between people who like Dr. Key said, are going to the park and hanging with their friends for fun and like it helping, their mental, but it not being like the intention. Like if we start telling people that, hey, self-care just isn't washing your face and brushing your teeth every day. Self-care is making sure you give yourself time to think, making sure you give yourself time to relax. Then that will like change the whole stigma behind it and like make people realize like mental health and self-care aren't things you should be like ashamed of, or aren't things only for a certain group of people. It's for everybody.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that question?
I don't have anything to add. I just want to say I do agree with what Everett said. I think that made a lot of sense.
Okay. So next question. How or when do you know that you need to implement self-care habit or practice?
For me, like one of my biggest indicators is when I start procrastinating. Because I'm a big procrastinator already, but when I start procrastinating stuff that like doesn't need to procrastinate it, then I know like something is up here. Like I need to like figure out what is really going on. A lot of times like I'll be doing 10 different tasks like within the day, and I'll like start putting off the little stuff, and I'll like start realizing like, hey, like maybe I need to take a break from this and like reevaluate real quick so that I can get this stuff done, because there's no reason I should be putting off washing the dishes. Like that's a simple task. There's nothing like hard about washing the dishes, but here I am sitting here watching TikToks for 2 hours, putting it off. So that's like one of the biggest indicators for me.
I feel like an indicator for me is just like if I like lash out more, that's not normal for me, or just sleeping a lot, then I'm like, okay, I need to do some self-care type of stuff.
I think for me, indicators are probably a combination of all of what's been said from Everett and Monisha. I also think another indicator for me is when I start feeling overwhelmed, feeling extremely exhausted. Another indicator for me is when I start forgetting things. If I've done, I try to order my day and plan things out. And so that's also, and like you drop the ball on little things that you normally don't drop the ball on. And so that's another indicator for me that, oh, it's time to do some self-care.
And for me personally, I think when that's what Dr. Key said, it's when like I started getting overwhelmed or like my mind goes like 1,000 miles a minute. And so I'm starting to learn that, you know, just have to take your time and really just try to calm down and try to ease your mind so you won't be, you know, overthinking about this certain situation or that certain situation, and just try to handle it the best way possible.
So I'll say this too. When my grandmother passed away almost over 10 years ago, I remember years later, probably about 6 or 7 years after she passed, I took this clinical test online, and the results was I was clinically depressed and didn't know it. I was like functional, still getting good grades, still doing everything, still high performing, but I was still clinically depressed. And you can be functional and be depressed, and that's a dangerous situation because it's harder to know that you're depressed. But I did know that in that time period, things that I enjoyed doing, I didn't really want to do. Like I didn't want to be around as many people or, you know, do as much as I used to would, you know, do. Even music, going to music concerts, just, it could be artists I really like. If they came in this area, oh well. Now, before she passed, I would have been breaking my neck to get front row seats, right? And so I learned that things that you really enjoy, you tend to kind of pull away from, and support groups and people who you really enjoy socializing with. And me as an only child, it takes a lot for me to want to socialize with folk. So when I do, I really do enjoy socializing, but I found myself withdrawing and isolating myself. And so those are also indicators, I think, that you need to do some self-care and assess yourself.
Yeah, you hit a really big point for me, Dr. Key. Like, I definitely feel what you're saying. Like, I feel like at some point in like the recent years, I kind of just had this switch flip where I just wasn't as excited to do certain things. Like I play hockey and I love hockey. I love playing it. I love like going to like the events surrounding it. Like I like the people who are involved in it. But at one point I just had like a switch flip and I just was like, I don't even want to play hockey anymore. And like in my head, I'm like, that doesn't even sound right because like I love the game and like every time I'm here, I love it. I'm having the most fun, like the time of my life. But like the thought of it when I'm at home, like, dang, I gotta go to practice. Dang, I gotta go to a game, or I don't really want to be here. Like those things just started like intruding in my mind. And like that happened with everything, like school, like, oh, I didn't want to be here. Like, I don't even like anybody here. Like, I'm just here because I gotta be here. And I think for a lot of people, that switch flips and they like chalk it up to, oh, I'm just antisocial and like I grew apart from these people. But in reality, it's just like you're not taking time to like look at yourself and realize I might be depressed or I might be stressed out or you know, I like doing this thing, but something about it is like not making me want to be here. And I need to figure out what that is rather than just leaving it alone. So that was a really big point that you hit on. Does anyone else want to add to that question before we move on to the next one? All right, with that being said, move on to our next question, which kind of tied in to the last part. Life has a way of becoming complicated. How do you safeguard your self-care routine? I think this question is really important, especially in the climate that we're in now, where it seems like every day there's like something new that's happening, whether that be like world events or like individual events. For me personally, I always try to like remember that everything happens for a reason, and I don't sweat things that are out of my control. You know, I wish I could control everything. I wish that everything could go how I wanted it to go, but that's just simply not how life is. And I think that's one of the biggest things that like guards my mental is that I try my hardest not to stress over things that I can't control.
Yeah, I think I try to safeguard minds by learning to tell people no. Sometimes so many people need so much from you, and that's okay because we are everything to everyone often. But there are times when you just have to say, no, I have to guard this time. I can't do that because that's my time for me to do X, Y. Just like when you go to work, you guard that time so you can go make your money. If you have 2 or 3 hours throughout the week that you use for self-care, guard that time. And I'm busy, or I can't do that this time, I'll catch you later. It's okay to say no, and it's okay to not be okay. Just know that you have to guard the time that you need so that you can become okay. And so I think for me, that's my safeguard, is literally treating that time like you would treat work or something, where you can't just drop the ball at work and run here for someone or run there for someone necessarily. So just safeguard it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like I was saying earlier, that's like the part of life that I'm working on right now, is not always saying yes. Because like I said, I always feel like I'm not doing enough. And then in the moment, like when I'm doing 10 different things at a time, I'm like, this is way too much. And it doesn't help that like a lot of the times, especially I feel like for people like Dr. Key, who's always doing like these great things for people and got all these people who depend on him. Like I depend on Dr. Key heavily. But I also understand that sometimes, you got to say no to people. You can't always be the superhero. You can't always wear the cape. So that's a part of the thing that I'm working on right now. Okay, if anyone else doesn't want to go, we can move on to the next question, which is, in what ways have you benefited from your self-care routine? Me personally, I just realized that like when I do take time to do self-care, I realize that I'm just happier for one. I have more energy, more patience. I do like when I am doing a task, I perform better. Whether that's like at work or like at school, I perform better when I'm feeling better. Yeah.
I think I benefit because I start practicing what I preach. You can't be a public health expert, a public health professional, and not practice what you preach. And at the same time, while practicing it, another benefit is other people are watching you. You never know who's watching you. I have mentees that are watching me up close, and I have mentees that are watching me afar, right? You have family members watching you up close and afar. You even got haters watching you up close and afar. And you start modeling behaviors that they're like, wow. So now I have folk doing self-care who wasn't doing self-care because they saw me start doing self-care. So that's another benefit, is that by practicing it, it helps to kind of evangelize the importance of it to like the masses.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, with me, you perform better. I feel like when you like take care of yourself, and, you're able to function clearly. You're not tired, and so that's for me. Like, just being able to function to the best of my abilities. I think that, like what you said, Everett, that helps me.
Okay, if that's all for that question, I'm gonna pass it to Amir for our last two.
Okay, so our next question is, are your self-care habits individual only, or do you practice self-care in a group setting?
That's a great question.
For yeah, for me, mine, it kind of depends. When I really need time to myself, it's mostly individual, just because like you gotta have time to recharge your social battery. Like Dr. Key said, he was the only child. I was the only child, so I was by myself, for a majority of the time. So I enjoy my alone time, and like I don't always have the energy to be around a bunch of people 24/7. So that individual, recharge time is like very important for me. But I do also like doing things with people that like are de-stressors, like going to the movies. Like that's a huge de-stressor for me, because you can kind of relax, you can laugh, be around people who you care about, and it's self-care. So it kind of just depends on the day. Like if I really need that time for myself, then it's individual. But if I'm with people and I feel like we all could use a little self-care, then it'll be a group thing.
First of all, that's a shirt. You need to go ahead and market that. Recharge your social battery. Hashtag recharge your social battery, right? You have to. And I think that self-care for me is about that individual recharging. And it can spill over into a group care type of thing. But like Everett, I think so eloquently put, it starts with self first. That's why we call it self-care. But it can be expanded into a group setting. But people have to have the same like mind, right? They have to have the same intention and be with one accord in that vein.
Yeah, that is a really big point too. Um, Especially when talking about like trying to do things in a group, especially when it's something as important as your mental health. Like the people you're doing it with got to be on the same page. Um, and I feel like for the people around me, that's not like a hard thing, because like my inner circle, we all got like the same sort of mindset. We all think the same. But just for anybody out there, like when you try to incorporate people into your, like, I like to think of it as like special time. Like when you incorporate other people into your special time, you got to make sure those people realize what like is riding on this time. Like this is important. Like we may be chilling, but this is still important. So you got to make sure like the people around you, when you do group self-care, understand that.
For me personally, I think like I kind of feel better when it's like in a group setting because I'm just like a social person. But like when it's like individual, like you do need time to kind of be away from people and try to recharge your social battery, like Everett said. Um, but I think for me personally, like groups help more because I feel like you're able to like spread the positivity throughout the whole entire group and have like them around, stuff like that.
Yeah, and Dr. Q was talking about accountability earlier. Sometimes for some people you need that like accountability person or persons. So group, like in a group setting, is like the only time, we'll get that. So I understand the wanting to like be in a group with people, especially if you got like an accountability partner or a friend group of accountability partners.
That's a good segue into the last question.
Yeah. So that's actually a very, very good segue. So who are you accountable to for your self-care?
I'll kick it off. I'm accountable to my family, my mom, a couple of my family members I'm extremely close to, who will know immediately just from having a conversation with me if something's not right, right? And then I have a couple of friends and colleagues who I have given permission to call me and to check me if I have not been taking care of myself in that manner. So yeah, It's a couple people. It's more than one for me.
Yeah, I'm sure the same way. I got a few people that can like tell when something is off, but for the most part, it's my older brother. Like he can call me and within seconds he'll be like, "What's been going on today? Because you're off. Like this is not like this ain't normal." Like, and that's not always when I'm feeling bad. Like maybe one day I'm smiling a little bit too much, like, and he'll pick up on that and be like, "So what happened today that got you smiling so hard?" Like just little things like that. It's always like for me, it's always my older brother who like picks up on the little things and is able to like decipher what is really going on with me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's my grandparents. Like my grandma, she knows exactly like what I'm feeling, just like a simple like facial expression or stuff like that. And like, I mean, you need those people in your life. Like, they really help you a lot because sometimes when you don't want to like address it full out, they like kind of like guide you through it and help you like pick stuff apart that you wouldn't really want to share or like have that moment with anyone else. So I feel like having the accountable for self-care, that's a big thing because it can change your mood, like for real. So yeah, so I think that's the best thing.
Yeah, I agree. I would say like my family, they know like mood wise, like, okay, what's wrong? Because you're not yourself or the way I sound or the way I look. They'll ask me, we know you. So that's who, be my family.
Well, thank everyone for tuning in today. This has been another Youth Perspective Talk Show brought to you by the Flint Public Health Youth Academy as we're starting to wind down on our summer mental health campaign and prepare for our fall programming. We hope that if you haven't caught any of our previous shows, we started in May with our launch on mental health, and you can always go back to our first of all, our Facebook site here, but then you can also go to FPHYA, FPHYA 810 on YouTube, and we archive all of our talk shows there, and you can get caught up on what we've been discussing as it relates to mental health. So again, we thank you for joining us. Tune in week after next as we do our next show. We'll see you there. Have a great one. Goodbye, everybody.